Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today we're taking a look at the all-new for 2013 Toyota RAV4 compact crossover vehicle. Now the RAV4 had been the best-selling small crossover in America, but they lost that title last year, and they're hoping with this 2013 refresh to regain the title of the best-selling crossover in America. Let's see if that's possible. The first thing you'll notice about the new RAV4 is this all-new front end. Now Toyota has decided to ditch the mini truck looks of the previous generations of RAV4 and instead have gone for a very stylized, very crossover sedan-like nose up here. Really not sure I like the style, but I'd like to hear what you think, so go ahead and comment in the comment section down below. I have met a few people that really liked it, but on the whole, most of the people that I've encountered this week thought that there was just a little bit too much going on the front of the 2013 RAV4. We do have nice projector headlamps. Those did work very well in the dark and mountain driving. Standard reflector style high beams here. We have also integrated daytime running lights into the front of the car. The side profile of the RAV4 hasn't changed too much for the 2013 model year. We have these more scalloped hips going on the side of the RAV4. They remind me an awful lot of the Volvo XC60 if I'm honest. We still have a decent amount of ride height, as you can see on the side profile of the RAV4. That means that the RAV4 is probably one of the more capable off-road vehicles in this very small crossover segment. It's not really saying much. I wouldn't really want to take my RAV4 rock crawling, for instance, but if you do need to hop a curb or go over a few pebbles, you're more likely to be able to do that in the RAV4. The RAV4 has also grown slightly for the 2013 model year. It's just a little bit longer than last year. It means you stick a little bit more cargo in the back. But what's most important about the 2013 model year RAV4 is that behind this rear door, you won't get a 7-seat option in the RAV4. It is now a 5-seat SUV only. So if you want something that's small like this, but seat 7, you're pretty much limited to that Dodge Journey at this point. If you look at the rear, you can see what I mean about that Volvo character line. Volvo has a definite hip going on in all their modern vehicles. They started it in 1999 with that Volvo S80, and they've continued it through today. Now, the tail lamps don't climb up the side like you find in the Volvo XC60, so that is quite unique. However, the hatch has this different, not Volvo-like, step down from the window section to this rest of this tailgate section right here. And that tailgate is also what's very new for 2013, because you'll notice we don't have a spare tire back here, and we also don't have a handle over here because this door no longer opens to the side with a side hinge. It's now a regular hatch, but there's a problem. This isn't a problem that I've just noticed. This is a problem that RAV4 owners on our Facebook page have let us know about as well. And the problem is Toyota put that trunk release kind of high in the rear hatch. And of course, the loading height in the RAV4 is the lowest among its direct competition, so it makes it easier to put items in the trunk, but it also means that this hatch is quite large. So if you're standing at a normal distance from the hatch, you know, I'm 6 feet tall, I'm standing at a fairly normal distance from here, pulling the handle, you end up getting hit right there, and you have to back up quite far in order to open the hatch. Now, the hatch does open nice and high, so you don't really have a problem getting under that if you're 6 feet or so tall. If you're a little bit taller than that, you might have a problem. But it also means that if you're parking your RAV4 in a parallel parking space and there's another car right here, you will have a bit of a problem getting into this cargo area. There is a handy line on the backup camera that is standard on all RAV4 models to show you about how far you need to be away from that car in order to open the hatch versus in order to keep from hitting your bumper. But that's right about here. So I still find myself having to lean back against the hood of that car behind me in order to open the hatch. It is a little bit of an ergonomic problem. There's some major changes under the hood for 2013. The first is you won't find a V6 engine option in any model of the Toyota RAV4 anymore. Instead, the only option that we have under the hood is a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine. It produces 176 horsepower and 172 pound-feet of torque. New for 2013, it's now mated to a 6-speed automatic transaxle instead of that old-school 4-speed that it had last year. Optional all-wheel drive is still available on all trims of the RAV4. It's about $1,400, and that will send power to the rear wheels up to about 50% of the total engine power. Our viewers have asked us to comment on headlamp performance. Let's take a look at that now. The RAV4 has standard projector low beams and standard reflector high beams. The reflector high beam tends to shine a lot of its light in a very dispersed pattern along the road. So instead of having a very bright hot spot like you'll find with certain high beams, this sort of blankets the entire forest in a high beam light. It's not quite as bright, forward speaking, as some of those more focused beams, but it does shed an awful lot more light to the side than certain other systems. The projector low beam is fairly average in this segment. It's neither terribly dim nor terribly bright. Front seat comfort varies depending on which model of RAV4 you're in. If you're in the base model or this mid-range model XLE that we're in right now, we get a 6-way manual adjustable driver's seat. There's no adjustable lumbar support in this seat at all. I found the seat just a little bit uncomfortable because of it. If you step up to that limited trim, you get these Softex imitation leather seats, but you also get an adjustable lumbar support, and I found that seat to be fairly comfortable. Overall, the driving position is very upright and very SUV-like. We also get a tilt telescoping steering wheel across all models of the RAV4. However, if you want a leather-wrapped steering wheel, then you have to step up to that limited trim as well. It is a little bit unusual because an awful lot of the competition includes a leather-wrapped steering wheel, which has a much better feel than this plastic urethane steering wheel in the mid-range models. And that's not something you find in the RAV4. You do have to step up to that limited model in order to get that. Rear seat comfort in the RAV4 is excellent regardless of which model of RAV4 you get. The seat bottom cushions are a little bit close to the floor, but that's pretty good for families with small children because they'll find these rear seats an awful lot more comfortable. If you're an adult, however, there is a decent amount of room between your thighs and these seat bottom cushions. However, that's made up for a little bit by the amount of rear legroom available in the RAV4, and that's thanks to the loss of that third row seat in the RAV4. So again, this is only a 5-seater SUV because that third row seat with a 6th and 7th seat is now gone for 2013. It's just not an option. If you want a 7-seat Toyota SUV, you have to step up to that Highlander model, but it has paid dividends in rear seat legroom. This driver's seat is adjusted for me, and as you can see, I have a decent amount of legroom left there. We also don't have much of a hump in the middle, even though we're in an all-wheel drive model, making this middle seat fairly comfortable. I still have a few inches of headroom left right here in this middle seat, even though we have the sunroof in our particular model. There's a decent amount more legroom and more hip room back here for this middle seat than you'd find in something like a Mazda CX-5. So if you routinely carry 3 passengers in the rear, this is something to keep in mind. If I move over to the right side, this front seat was adjusted for a 6'5" passenger. It's all the way back in its seat travel. So you can see I still have about 3.5 inches of legroom left there. We have a fairly narrow center armrest, but we have 2 large cup holders back here, which were very easy to use and very accommodating of large sodas. These rear seats also fold completely flat with the cargo area, making carrying large items much easier in the Toyota RAV4. In addition to folding flat with that cargo area, these rear seats also recline. It's a 3-stage arrangement. This is its most reclined position. We have a middle position, and then we have a very upright position here. The upright position is handy for squaring off that rear cargo area, but it's not terribly comfortable. One thing to note is that unlike other SUVs, the hinge mechanism on these rear seat backs is very low in the seat. So a lot of SUVs where the rear seats fold like this or they recline like this, they put that hinge mechanism kind of high in the seat, which ends up hitting you strangely in the back if you try and recline the seat, strangely making reclining the seat a lot less comfortable than having the seat in an upright position. Let's take a closer look at the RAV4's interior. Again, we're in the mid-range XLE model, so we get these cloth seats with contrasting stitching. If you opt for the limited model, you do get these Softex imitation leather seats. Real leather is not an option in any price level of the RAV4. Over here on the doors, we'll find a decent collection of hard plastics. That's hard plastics up here. We do have a nice soft fabric insert right there, and then we get this carbon fiber effect trim over there on the other part of the door handle. There are a lot of shapes going on the dashboard of the RAV4, and that's really my only stylistic complaint. We have these round air vents over here, then we have slightly more traditional air vents going on here in the center console. We have another vent up here, and this vent is for the rear seat passengers. This helps direct air back there since there's no rear seat air vent. Here in the center console, we get a standard 6.1-inch touchscreen LCD, which is a very nice feature. It's the Toyota Entune system. But as you can see in this video, it's very easily washed out by light, especially sunlight in the car. And this is as bright as this display gets. So if I turn the audio on, you'll see that reading the information on the screen is not terribly better when the light's on. If it's at twilight, the colors going on in the screen make it a little bit more difficult to read as well. If you get the base model, you get a single zone climate control. Upper level models do have this dual zone climate control going on right here. All models also have this stitched pleather dashboard strip right here, which does make the interior an awful lot dressier than otherwise. If we move down here, you'll find your Eco Mode and Sport Mode buttons, as well as the auxiliary input and the USB jack for your media device. They aren't hidden away like some other cars, so your USB device has to be there with its cord hanging around. We have one large cup holder right here. I was a little bit concerned that it would hit the dash with larger 40-ounce sodas, but that really wasn't the case in the RAV4. If we move further down, you'll find the other cup holder. This one also has a removable insert, so you can make it even bigger if you're in an area where they have those large styrofoam sodas. We have a large and deep center console cubby right there as well. Moving over to the driver's side, you'll see a new steering wheel that has a faux stitched effect trim. This is just a hard piece of injection molded plastic. It's been injection molded to look like it has faux stitching on it. So it's very different than this soft material right here with actual stitching in it, because over here we just have the fake stitching. That is a little bit of a problem for me because this is something that you touch all day long while you're driving the car. The other problem I had was this urethane steering wheel, because you can only get the leather wrapped wheel in the limited model. Over here we have our telephone controls, this display button controls that small LCD right there on the speedometer. Over here we have our radio controls, source selection, back button, volume up, down, etc. Take a look at the instrument cluster. We have a 3-dial arrangement. The temperature gauge is a little digital gauge right there in the center of that LCD. One of the major changes for the 2013 model year was the changing of the hatch that hinged right over here on this side of the RAV4 for a hatch that hinges up here where you'd find it on most modern crossovers. That of course meant that Toyota had to relocate the spare tire, and that spare tire is now right here under this hatch. There's also a little bit of additional storage down there as well. They put the jack right over here in a cubby on the side of the rear cargo area. Now, if you're worried that that means that the cargo load floor of the RAV4 has raised for 2013, then fear not, because this cargo load floor is still the lowest in the industry, making it an awful lot easier to put large items like this right in your RAV4, especially if you're a smaller person. It also means that at 6 feet tall, I can comfortably sit on this rear hatch with my feet flat on the ground. It is kind of a nice feature if you're tailgating or something like that in your small crossover. That means that it's now time to see how comfortable this trunk is. And the RAV4 easily scores 9 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index because this cargo area is quite large. It's large enough that you can actually fit 4x8 sheets of things inside the RAV4 for the 2013 model year. If you hadn't noticed, this cargo hatch is pretty wide, and Toyota has very specifically designed it to allow 4-foot wide items to sit right here on the bottom of this hatch. Now, you can't close the hatch if you fit something 8 feet long in here. You do have to leave the hatch open a little bit, but that's finally possible with the way that this hatch opens. Let's take a quick look at the RAV4's infotainment options. If you don't care about infotainment, or if this is just boring, then go ahead and skip on over to the drive section of the review by following those instructions at the bottom of your screen, and we will catch you later. All RAV4s for 2013 come standard with this 6.1-inch touchscreen LCD. It's not a terribly bright LCD, as I noted earlier, and it's easily washed out by the sun, so it's most visible when you take a look at something like these app screens. You take a look at the map option over here. You can see that the daylight washes it out pretty badly. It's not that much better in person than it is on this camera here. So this is a fairly reliable rendition of what the screen looks like in person. That's kind of a pity because the software is fairly easy to use, as we'll go over now. Over here on the Audios tab, you'll see our iPod interface, which is standard first. We have full access to our iPod via this menu system. We have advanced voice commands are optional with the optional N-Tune system that's available in the XLE model. It's not standard in the base model. So the base model you have to browse via those browse commands there. Toyota has made some improvements into their voice command system this year, so it now handles larger libraries than it did before. That's a welcome change. That base model does have AM and FM radio, but if you want satellite or HD radio, you have to add that N-Tune option as well. Blind spot monitoring is a $500 option. It is bundled also with the $1,530 nav system that's available in the XLE as well as the limited model, and that's available over here in the apps button. It's kind of an odd position to put the maps button when you think about it, but the reason that Toyota does this is because it is optional and it runs just like any of these apps on the system. So we have Bing, Pandora, iHeartRadio, weather, fuel prices, etc., movies, sports, traffic, OpenTable. And all these apps pull their data off your smartphone, so you do have to have a paired and supported smartphone in order to use these apps, and again, that's part of the N-Tune package. So you can get N-Tune, and then you can bump yourself up to N-Tune with navigation. There's also a $2,160 JBL audio package, which includes blind spot monitoring, cross-path detection, as well as navigation and the N-Tune apps. So we go back over here to the car button. You'll find your fuel economy and trip information for our 2013 RAV4. Over here on the phone button, we have a fairly typical Bluetooth phone interface. It does support SMS text messaging if that is supported by your phone, and at the moment, iPhones do not support that feature. Over on the navigation screen, you can see that the navigation is very snappy because it's all flash-based. in this Entune system. It's very easy to use, and this is my preference in Toyota's current navigation lineup. I find that the navigation software that's used in the Lexus products and the higher-end Toyota products is actually a lot harder to use than this system. It's not quite as simple to navigate around. It's oftentimes a little bit slower to enter destinations and receive traffic messages and route options, etc. This is definitely a very nice nav system. It's definitely worth the $1,500 when you consider that it also comes with the blind spot monitoring and cross-traffic detection. So my estimate on the actual cost of the nav software is right around $600 or $700, which is fairly reasonable. And again, it does bring the app integration, Pandora smartphone integration. This does now work with Android phones, certain Android phones, so be sure and check with that compatibility list before you buy the car and depend on your Pandora radio. You can search for destinations and restaurants, etc. using the Bing feature. That is kind of handy. You do have to have the Entune app running on your smartphone for a lot of these features, however, and that does require an Entune login with their system. So you do have to have a smartphone that's supported, and you have to have that app, and the app has to be logged in as well. Overall, I would rank the 6.1-inch Entune system second in this segment, below the Hyundai and Kia options. The Hyundai and Kia systems use a larger 8-inch touchscreen LCD. That's not standard in those particular models, but it is available in most of the models that you'll find on the dealer lot. That system is just about as easy to use as this system, just as fully featured, but offers a bright and clear 8-inch LCD. This LCD is really the only downside to this system, is that it's quite dim, it's difficult to read, and based on the positioning of the windscreen in this car and the positioning of this screen as well, it tends to wash out in sunlight, as I said. Still, the system is a lot easier to use than what you'll find in the Mazda CX-5. If you'd like to know more about that CX-5 system, then just click on over to our Mazda 6 review. It's the same system that's used in the Mazda 6, in the Mazda 5 as well. It doesn't crash as often as my Ford Touch. My Ford Touch is not standard in the Ford Escape, so it is something to keep in mind if you're looking at the base model as well. My Ford Touch is more easily readable in sunlight, and it offers a few more features in the system. It has a slightly classier look as well, but overall, I think I'd prefer this system because it just doesn't crash as often and it does everything that I need it to do. The loss of the V6 option for 2013 has had a profound impact not just on the RAV4 but on this entire segment, because the last RAV4 was the last V6 model available. So now if you take a look at the small crossover segment in America, it's exclusively 4-cylinder. Now Ford does have a variety of 4-cylinder engines, some with turbos and some without, but there's no V6 available in this particular segment anymore. That last RAV4 was the end. But in terms of impact on the RAV4 itself, what that meant was that Toyota needed to make the 4-cylinder model more competitive than it was before, and they did that by adding that 6-speed automatic transmission, and it's had a huge impact on this 4-cylinder RAV4. 0 to 60 times have improved greatly, now down to just over 8.5 seconds. I think we scored about 8.6 seconds from 0 to 60 in this car. Fuel economy has also improved. We're up to 25 miles per gallon in our very mixed driving average here. Again, I go up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass. It's very easy to get 30 miles per gallon on the highway in this all-wheel drive version of the RAV4, and that is important to keep in mind because this car does have that all-wheel drive system, which adds loss as well as about 160 pounds to the RAV4 itself. Toyota has not made any significant changes in cabin noise for the 2013 model year. We measured 68 decibels at 50 miles an hour on an asphalt road, which places the RAV4 sort of in the middle of the pack in terms of interior quietness. It's definitely below the new Hyundai Santa Fe as well as the Ford Escape, but it is about the same as the Honda CR-V and a little bit better than something like a Jeep Patriot. The RAV4 actually reminds me a little bit more of the Jeep Patriot than the other entries in this segment because, strangely enough, Toyota has kept some of the off-road abilities in this RAV4, even though it's a car-based crossover utility vehicle. And that's primarily because they have this locking center coupling. And there's no center differential in the RAV4 like you'd find in something like a Jeep Grand Cherokee or some other serious off-roading vehicle like a 4Runner, things like that. Instead, this is just a viscous coupling, and it normally apportions power based on slippage. So most of the power is going to the front. It can send up to 50% of the power to the rear by locking that center coupling, causing the inputs to the front and the rear front and rear differentials, I should say, to be tied physically one-to-one with one another. And you can actually activate that manually with this little button on the dashboard up to speeds of about 25 miles an hour, meaning that it's a lot easier to get this car unstuck from the mud than something like a CR-V or a Ford Escape, which don't offer that locking function. It's somewhat similar to the Jeep Patriot and the Jeep Compass, except that Jeep's system will allow you to maintain that center coupling in a locked position at any speed, whereas this system has a high-speed cutout of around 25 miles an hour or so. Now, the approach, departure, and breakover angles aren't as good as that Jeep system, and the Jeep system is designed a little bit more robustly if you do want to take your Patriot off-roading. It's more designed for that, and this RAV4 really isn't. But the RAV4 will provide just a little bit more security if you're going to go, on dirt roads or gravel roads and you expect to encounter some mud holes or something along those lines. This would perform just a little bit better than something like a Ford Escape or that Hyundai Santa Fe. On the downside, that ride height and just the overall design of the RAV4 means that you get a decent amount of body roll, very much like you'd get in those Jeep products in the corners. So the RAV4 is not the best handling vehicle in this segment. That award really goes to the Mazda CX-5. And while I'm talking about that Mazda CX-5, the CX-5 has a better ride as well. You'd think that softer suspension and higher profile tires in this RAV4 versus the CX-5 would mean that the RAV4 would deliver the better ride, but that's not actually the case. The CX-5, with its better handling dynamics, also delivers a better ride, and a quieter cabin, I might add. So in terms of ride comfort and rideability for the average person out on the road, that Mazda CX-5 really is tops in this segment, followed by that Ford Escape, probably followed by a tie between the RAV4 and the CR-V, right about neck and neck with that new Hyundai Santa Fe. The Hyundai Santa Fe does a very good job, but it still is just a little bit behind some of the main competitors in this segment. That's not to say that the RAV4 is sloppy by any stretch of the imagination. It is a fairly well-handling vehicle, and the suspension is tuned very nicely. It's just that it's not quite as good as that Mazda CX-5. I have to point out two things while we're out on the road that did worry me just a little bit about the Toyota RAV4. The first thing is this urethane steering wheel. As I said earlier, it doesn't have a very good feel to it. It's very slippery. It just doesn't have any good grip to it like you'd find in the leather-wrapped steering wheel in the limited model RAV4. So if you're looking at the base or the mid-range models of Toyota RAV4, that is something to keep in mind. If you're looking at that limited model, then it really doesn't matter because you're going to get a leather-wrapped steering wheel anyway. The other thing is the trailing edge of the hood, which is very visible from my vantage point right here. And the hood just doesn't seem to either be supported very well or it's not terribly rigid, because I can see the hood flapping in the breeze from this particular vantage point, and that is a little bit disturbing. The RAV4 isn't a terribly expensive car, but with Toyota's reputation for quality, durability, reliability, etc., it's not really something that I had expected out of Toyota. However, all the other panel gaps in this interior are very good. Every seam and every fit and finish detail is done very nicely in this RAV4, something that I was a little bit disappointed with in the larger Venza, so I was a little bit worried about how Toyota would pull off this 2013 RAV4 redesign, but not to worry, this cabin is very well put together. The transmission of the RAV4 is shift happy. It's shift happy up and shift happy down. So if you're in eco mode and you're city driving, the transmission will skip right on up to 6th gear just about as quickly as it can. And if you encounter a slight incline in the roadway, the transmission is fairly eager to downshift as well. Fortunately, the shifts in this transmission are fairly smooth. I'd rate it about second in this segment, just below the Ford Escape, which has a very nice feeling transmission in it. Very much like Honda's CR-V and very unlike the Ford Escape, the RAV4's pricing is fairly simple. Things start out just over $23,000 and they end up just over $28,000 depending on your options and the trim. That base model is of course going to be a front-wheel drive model, and that top-end model is going to be the limited model with all-wheel drive, all the options, the imitation leather seats and the leather steering wheel, etc. That makes this a decent discount over a top-end Ford Escape. However, that Ford Escape is going to have an awful lot more features than you'd find in this RAV4. The RAV4 scores an awful lot of points for practicality. We have the largest cargo hold in this particular segment. Thanks to the loss of the 7-seat option, we now have a lot of rear seat legroom as well. Those rear seats recline in this model, and the interior is overall fairly large enough to easily accommodate 4x8 sheets of whatever that you want to jam inside, provided that you leave that tailgate cracked just a little bit. It's not something you can do in most of the other entries in this particular segment. We also have a slight focus on off-roading with approach, departure, and breakover angles that are better than most of the competition. We have that all-wheel drive system that has a locking center coupling to give it just a little bit more off-road ability than you'd find in those other vehicles. Pricing for the RAV4 is a little bit interesting because it's obvious when you take a look at that pricing that the Toyota is really aiming for that very middle to low end of the compact crossover segment. And that's really obvious when you look at the RAV4 and you look at its pricing, because nothing about the RAV4 excites me overly. The Ford Escape is just a more exciting vehicle for me because I like those luxury vehicles in my small crossover. The Mazda CX-5 is definitely the sportier vehicle, But in terms of the bulk of the segment, I'm talking 80% of buyers or so, the RAV4 and the Honda CR-V are right in there with the mid to low range of that Ford Escape and of course all of the Mazda CX-5s. When I talk about that Ford Escape, the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that Ford is really targeting kind of a different buyer with the Escape than with this RAV4. And they're also targeting a much broader array of buyers again than with this RAV4, especially with those turbo engine offerings and a much more luxurious and more feature-rich interior. They're aiming a decent amount higher than the RAV4, so you can't really compare all of the models of Escape quite directly with the RAV4, and that's something important to keep in mind. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been our quick look at the 2013 Toyota RAV4 crossover vehicle. Be sure and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be notified of all of our latest videos. Be sure and comment on this video, tell us what you liked and what you didn't like about the car or about the video in general. And be sure and comment on the YouTube channel and tell us what you liked and what you didn't like about this channel, what you'd like to see us do next time, what cars you'd like to see us review. And of course, if you have any general automotive questions, be sure and post them over there as well.